10. Neil BADROCK. 28-year-old Neil BADROCK was participating in a 10-hour pub crawl in Liverpool, England last year when his behavior got out of hand. He eventually got kicked out of a bar. He called his father, 51-year-old Neil Farrington, who went down to the pub to try and calm his son down. Security footage shows Farrington shoving BADROCK outside, causing him to fall on the ground. BADROCK got up, headbutted his father, and proceeded to brutally assault him. He took things too far when he bashed Farrington's head against the pavement and began kicking and stomping on him, cracking his skull. A horrified witness who called for help said that BADROCK repeatedly returned to his father and resumed beating him after starting to walk away. Farrington died from his injuries, and police arrested BADROCK on suspicion of murder. He initially tried claiming that he had acted purely in self-defense, but the court found that Farrington had tried backing away from the fight, and that his son continued attacking him. BADROCK was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 19 years and has lost the support of most of his family members. 9. Avery Robinson. All hell broke loose for one family during a trip to Disneyland in Anaheim, California in 2019. A sudden fight broke out between them in the park's Toontown area. In footage of the disturbing melee, a woman can be seen spitting in a man's face before he punches her multiple times. The man then accused another woman in the group of attacking his mother and shoved her repeatedly. Numerous people intervened at various points, with one park visitor pulling a child out of harm's way during the altercation. Another bystander put one of the brawlers in a chokehold in an attempt to get him under control. During the video, 35-year-old Las Vegas resident Avery Desmond Edwin Robinson can be heard saying, "I'm ready to go to jail tonight," and references a Southern California gang. Despite the evidence against them, everyone involved in the fight reportedly denied any involvement when they first spoke with officers. Avery was hit with 5 felony charges in connection with various things he was accused of doing. His charges included assaulting and threatening people, endangering children, and assaulting an employee with his vehicle. He pleaded guilty to several counts and was sentenced to 6 months in jail. Avery's sister, Andrea Nicole Robinson, was charged with 5 misdemeanors for attacking him and 2 others during the fight. Andrea's husband, Damon Petrie, was charged with battery for allegedly punching Avery's girlfriend in the face. The couple failed to appear in court, and warrants were issued for their arrest. 8. Shot by a stranger. Tyler and Sarah Schmidt recently took their 9-year-old son, Arlo, and their 6-year-old daughter, Lula, on a camping trip in Iowa's Maquoketa Caves State Park, not far from their home. They were sleeping in their tent when someone came along and shot them during the early morning hours, killing Tyler, Sarah, and Lula. Arlo was the only survivor of the attack. Authorities also found the suspect's body nearby. They identified him as 23-year-old Anthony Orlando Sherwin and determined that he took his own life. Investigators found out that Sherwin had been camping with his parents about 75 yards, or 68.5 meters, away from the Schmidts when he committed the senseless act of violence. The 2 parties had no interaction prior to the shooting and didn't know each other, leaving his motive a mystery. Even after interviewing nearby campers, including the shooter's family, detectives are still puzzled as to why Sherwin chose to randomly massacre the Schmidts. His mother, Cecilia, told the Papillon Times that she first learned about the murders when a little boy approached her and asked her for help, saying his family had been shot. She couldn't find Sherwin and even began to worry that he had fallen victim to the gunman. Cecilia further said that her son gave no indication that anything was wrong or that he was planning a horrific act of violence. More details about the triple homicide are expected to become available as the investigation continues. 7. Cable car catastrophe. Several families' lives were destroyed on May 21, 2021, when a cable car they were riding on fell and crashed just feet from the summit of Motorone in northern Italy. 14 people died, including a family of 5 from Israel, leaving 5-year-old Eaton Byron orphaned. In addition to losing his parents, his paternal great-grandparents and brother died in the accident. As investigators worked to determine what caused the tragedy, Eaton's relatives became entangled in a custody battle over the little boy. A judge awarded custody to his paternal aunt, Aya Byron Nurko, who lives in Italy and had taken care of Eaton for extended periods in the past. However, his maternal grandfather, Shmulik Peleg, took him for what was supposed to be a day-long outing and instead drove to Switzerland. He then flew the boy to Israel without his aunt's permission. Peleg insisted that he was acting in Eaton's best interests and that his actions were legal, while Italian authorities accused him of kidnapping his grandson and demanded that Peleg return him to Italy. The Pelegs lost their legal battle and Eaton was sent back to live with his aunt, but they vowed to keep fighting for custody of him. Meanwhile, an investigation of the cable car crash found a service technician at fault for disabling the car's emergency brake, which would have most likely saved the lives of the people who died. 6. Duck boat disaster. During World War II and the Korean War, the US and its allies used an amphibious type of vehicle called a DUKW, or duck boat, which are now famously used to give tours in various cities throughout the US. But there have been many accidents involving duck boats, leading many to question whether they should be allowed to operate. One of the most recent duck boat tragedies happened in 2018 in Missouri's Table Rock Lake. One of these vehicles entered the water despite a severe thunderstorm warning. By then, winds had already hit 60 miles per hour or 100 kilometers per hour, leading to 3-foot-high, 1-meter waves. Survivors would later say that the captain told them they didn't need to wear life jackets. The duck boat began to sink within 35 minutes of leaving the dock, as passengers desperately tried to escape. 17 people between ages 1 and 70 died, including 9 of survivor Tia Coleman's relatives. Her husband and 3 children were among those who drowned. Authorities accused the boat's captain, Kenneth Scott McKee, of failing to properly assess the weather conditions before setting out on the lake. A judge dismissed federal charges relating to McKee's alleged role in the sinking in 2020. But state authorities remained determined to see the case through and charged the captain and 2 other employees with 17 counts of involuntary manslaughter. The defendants asked a judge to dismiss the charges, arguing a lack of probable cause. However, the judge determined that the men were aware of the storm, but there's no evidence they knew about the gust front and dismissed the case. 5. Amish tragedy. Amos Stoltzfus and his family were respected members of their community in York County, Pennsylvania, where Amish and non-Amish, or English, residents live peacefully amongst each other. While dropping some of his wife, Katie Ann's fresh-cut flowers off at a local market recently, he told the owner about how he and his family were planning to go fishing and picnicking together that afternoon. From there, Amos went home to pick up his family, who piled onto a flatbed trailer that he pulled with his vintage tractor. As he carefully descended down the curvy road leading to the creek, the tractor went off the road during a hard right turn. It then hit a tree and fell down a steep 30-foot or 9.1-meter embankment. Katie Ann and 2 of the couple's children died in the accident, along with a nephew who was visiting from out of town. Amos and at least 2 other kids were critically injured. Local resident Lisa Grove told the York Daily Record that while most people think of the Amish as insular and cut off from the rest of the world, the Amish in York County have long-standing ties with the area's English residents and are active in the community. She also said that a person's Amish neighbors were often the first to help someone in need. Residents were left deeply saddened by the Stoltzfus family's tragedy and are coming together to donate toward their medical bills and help them in other ways through their grief and recovery. 4. A violent encounter. On the morning of July 3, 2020, a 45-year-old California doctor named Ari Gershman took his 15-year-old son, Jack, off-roading in a Jeep Rubicon he had just bought the day before. During their adventure, they encountered unfamiliar terrain and decided to ask for directions from the driver of a vehicle behind them. But before they could, the man pulled out a pistol and began shooting. Ari died at the scene, and Jack ran for his life and in search of higher ground so he could get a cell phone signal and call for help. When Ari stopped responding to his wife Paige's texts, she became concerned and sent a text message to Jack asking if they were okay. In response, Paige received 2 terrifying video messages from her son, saying that he was lost in the woods alone and didn't think he was going to survive. He told his mother that Ari was dead and that his phone was dying. Jack's phone died after he called 911, giving him no choice but to wait and hope that help would soon arrive. He was finally rescued over 30 hours later. Detectives identified the suspect as 40-year-old John Conway, who lived about 100 miles or 161 kilometers from the murder scene. He apparently had numerous other warrants out for his arrest at the time of the shooting. It appears as though he was out for violence and attacked the Gershmans randomly. He was apprehended shortly after the incident, and it's unclear where his case currently stands. 3. A deadly drive. In October of last year, Heather and Brian Long sent out on an overnight drive from North Carolina to Disney World in Orlando, with 3 of their kids and a family friend. The couple were taking turns driving when Heather fell asleep in the passenger seat. She soon awoke to one of the kids screaming for help and saw that Brian was having a grand mal seizure. He had completely lost control of the vehicle. Heather later told the press that she immediately took her seatbelt off and reached for the steering wheel, hoping to regain control of the car and eventually get to the brake. During his seizure, Brian jerked and pressed his foot down on the gas, causing the SUV to accelerate to somewhere between 90 and 120 miles per hour, or 145 to 193 kilometers per hour. At that point, Heather knew that an accident was unavoidable. She feared that they were all going to die as the vehicle went airborne and flipped 3 times. Because she wasn't wearing her seatbelt, she was ejected from the SUV and sustained critical injuries, while the other 3 sustained minor injuries but were physically okay for the most part. Sadly, Brian was pronounced dead at the scene, turning what was supposed to be a fun family trip into a tragedy. In addition to having to heal emotionally from the loss of her husband, Heather endured multiple surgeries and the long-lasting effects of a traumatic brain injury, leaving her with vision problems, headaches, and nausea. 2. Road trip wreck. In 2018, Sandeep Thotapilli, his wife Sumya, and their 2 young children set out on a 900-mile or 1,448-kilometer road trip from Oregon to their home in Los Angeles and planned to visit relatives along the way. They made several stops before a family member in San Jose, who was expecting to see them, said they never arrived. Nobody could reach the Thotapillis, and a search was soon underway. Witnesses reported seeing a vehicle, matching the description of the family's SUV, falling down a steep embankment during heavy rain. The car was swept away by the Eel River in Mendocino County, leading investigators to fear the worst. They found car parts along the river, but heavy rains delayed the search effort for several days before they found the vehicle submerged and encased in sediment. 2 family members' bodies were inside the SUV, while the other 2 were found in the water within miles of where the tragic accident occurred. 1. Pontoon push-off. During a family outing at Clark's Hill Lake in Georgia last year, 32-year-old Shontover Kirkland rented 2 pontoon boats for more than a dozen people who were present at the gathering. The birthday celebration quickly went from fun to tragic in a split second. Kirkland supposedly shoved a woman wearing a life vest and her friend, 34-year-old Edward Lee Kirk, off the boat and into the deep, cold water. She was unaware that Kirk didn't know how to swim, but it instantly became clear that he was struggling in the water. His friend, 37-year-old Ain Wilson, jumped in after him and tried to save him, but both men eventually went underwater and failed to resurface. Their bodies were found the following week. Footage of the incident, along with a recording of the 911 call, helped police piece together exactly what had happened that day. Authorities charged Kirkland with reckless conduct and 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter for Kirk and Wilson's deaths. They claimed that by pushing her friend into the water without knowing if he could swim, she demonstrated a disregard for his safety. Kirkland pleaded guilty to the charges and was sentenced to 1 year in prison, followed by 9 years of probation. Thanks for watching! Would you rather deal with unexpected lightning and thunderstorms on the day of a planned outdoor party with relatives, or get a speeding ticket on your way to a family gathering? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe.